At Christmas, while I was working late at the school's winter outreach, my family branded my 7-year-old daughter a liar. They hung a sign around her neck that said, "Family Disgrace," and left her standing hungry in the corner. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I took action. 2 days later, my phone was exploding with their frantic calls. "My name is Hannah Cole. I'm 34, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. I'm a guidance counselor at the local high school, the person who tells other people's kids they're worth something, even when no one at home says it." Irony burns. That December, the universe actually handed me a break. Our district canceled evening programs for Christmas Eve, which meant for once, I could surprise my parents and show up for dinner with my little girl. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. I picture the scene in my head, me walking through the front door with gifts, my daughter Grace jumping into my parents' arms, laughter, hot cocoa, the works. But the moment I stepped inside, the fantasy shattered. The smell hit first, burnt gravy and something sour. The tree leaned like a drunk sailor, lights half dead, tinsel sliding off. Food smeared across the carpet. And my family, calm as ever, sitting at the dining table, laughing over dessert like nothing looked wrong. My mother, my father, my older sister Carla with her husband and their smug little boy Evan, my younger brother Derek and his wife Lily. Everyone accounted for except Grace. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What happened in here?" Carla stopped mid-bite. My mom's fork froze midair. No one spoke. Then my mother finally muttered, "That mess? Grace did it. She's been acting wild all day." The room tilted. "Where is she?" Dad pointed lazily toward the hallway. "In timeout. You should handle her." I followed the sound of soft crying into the den. Grace stood facing the wall in her red holiday dress, ripped at the hem, dirt on her knees. Tears streaked down her face. Across her forehead, thick black marker spelled one word, liar. Around her neck hung a piece of cardboard tied with string. On it, in bold letters, "Family Disgrace." For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. My mind fought to label what I was seeing prank, joke, dream. But it was none of those. My 7-year-old had been humiliated by her own family. I dropped to my knees. "Sweetheart." She spun, saw me and crumbled. "Mommy." She ran into my arms, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. I held her close, whispering, "It's okay, baby, I'm here." Then I turned back toward the dining room, Grace's small hand gripping my sleeve. They were still sitting there, Carla serving pie, Dad sipping coffee, holiday music humming behind them. "You're just sitting here," I said, my voice trembling, "while my daughter's crying in another room with this on her body." Mom didn't flinch. "She ruined Christmas, Hannah. Knocked the tree over, broke ornaments, lied about it. We made her own it." Grace buried her face in my coat. "Mom, it wasn't me. Evan pushed me." I looked at my sister. "You hear that?" Carla's smile was smug. "Evan doesn't lie." Grace climbed the chair. She fell. End of story. Grace shook her head violently. "He told me he'd hold it. He pushed me." I pulled out my phone, snapped pictures of a sign, the marker her scratches. Dad frowned. "What are you doing?" "Making sure this isn't rewritten later," I said. "Because that's what you do best, rewrite." I tore the cardboard from her neck and tossed it on the table. Tried wiping the marker from her skin. It only smeared, leaving angry red patches. "Look at her," I said. "She's trembling. Even if she had knocked over your stupid tree, she's 7. What you did isn't discipline, it's cruelty." Mom calmly sipped her coffee. "Kids need to learn consequences." "Consequences?" I snapped. "Consequences are chores, an apology, helping clean up, not branding a child with a sharpa." Dad muttered, "You've gone soft. That's why she acts up." Carla crossed her arms. "You always let her get away with things. Somebody had to teach her a lesson." I scanned their faces, each one cold, self-righteous, convinced they were right. Then Grace tugged my hand and whispered, "Mom, I'm hungry." The words hit harder than any slap. They hadn't fed her. They'd sat there, finishing dessert, while she cried alone in the dark. I turned to my mother. "You left a child starving because you didn't like what she said. Congratulations, you've turned parenting into punishment." Mom's mouth tightened. "If you can't control her, that's not our fault." I took a slow breath, grabbed Grace's coat, and knelt to button it. "You don't get to talk to her again," I said quietly. "Not after this." Carla scoffed. "Oh, please. Don't make this dramatic." I lifted Grace into my arms. "This is dramatic. You made it that way." Before I walked out, I looked around the table one last time. My mother's icy composure, my father's indifference, my siblings' smirks. "You'll remember this night," I said softly. "And so will I." Outside, snow drifted under the streetlight, soft as ash. Grace clung to me all the way to the car. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm really hungry." "I know, baby," I said. "We're going home." The words felt like a vow, because after that night, there would be no more forgiveness. Only consequences, real ones. I carried Grace straight to the car and into the warm glow of our house like I was carrying a live thing that needed careful handling. Inside, I fed her plate after plate until she ate like she'd been starving for days. She shoveled mashed potatoes and then paused, looked at me with that small, fierce face and said, "Mom, why do they do that?" I made a decision then, not a rash one, a careful, quiet one. This would not be erased by their stories or their excuses. If they wanted drama, I would give them proof. If they wanted to pretend nothing happened, I would make them accountable. First, the practical things. I lifted Grace into the bathtub and washed her until the Sharpie ran like rain down her cheeks. Her skin was raw where the marker had been. I scribbled down the time, took pictures of redness and scratches, and saved them to a locked folder on my phone. While she dried her hair, I set my voice recorder on the table and asked her to tell me exactly, in her own words, what had happened. Her voice, small and earnest, filled the clip. Nolan pushed me. I fell, they wrote liar. She cried while she said it, and every sob went into that file. Then I called my colleague at the clinic. "Can you see her now?" I asked. "It's urgent." Within an hour, a pediatrician I trust was examining Grace, checking for bruises, documenting the scratches, noting dehydration from not eating, and writing a formal medical note. I left the office with official paper in my bag, the sort of paperwork that turns a story into evidence. You learn, fast, the difference between protection and performative outrage. My family had the latter. They loved the optics of righteous punishment without the messy responsibility of parenting. They believed a label on a child would fix the story. I believed in facts. So I built a file, photos, timestamps, the doctor's note, the audio recording, plus my own notes about who said what and when. At night I sat up until 2 a.m, organizing everything. The recorder clipped, the photos sorted, the timestamps verified. I typed an account that read more like a police statement than a letter to relatives. Calm, precise, irrefutable. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't seeking vengeance for the thrill of it. I was building a case so no one could gaslight my daughter out of the truth. The next morning, I called Child Protective Services. The intake worker listened, asked the right questions, and said the words I had rehearsed in my head 100 times. "We'll open a case." She told me what I already knew, that naming the abuse didn't make me cruel. It made me responsible. CPS said they'd need to investigate the households where the child had been left, and that I should bring everything to my local law enforcement station as well. So I did both. I walked into the station with a portfolio and a calm face. I made my statement in a small room with fluorescent lights. The officer who took the report was efficient, professional, and uncomfortable in the right places. He asked about witnesses. I handed over names. He asked if I wanted a protective order. I said yes. It felt like stacking blocks, small pieces of legal armor that might protect us later. At home, I printed copies and saved backups. Then, because actions in families are often funded by hush money, I cut off what I had been quietly sending them. My parents had been drawing on my help for years, utilities, the occasional medical copay, the holiday extras. No more. I canceled the transfers that afternoon. I called the camp where Evan had a spot reserved and informed them that future payments would not be made by me. The registrar confirmed the cancellation. I called the mechanic about the car repair payment and told them to bill the owner directly. Everything that had once smoothed their lives out of my pocket was switched off like a faucet. The reaction was immediate. My phone filled with texts before I'd even finished making coffee. My mother's message read, "How could you? We raised you." My sister's was shorter, angrier. "You're insane. You'll regret this. My brother called and left 3 voicemails, a mix of threats, pleas, and performance. I didn't answer. I read them later like you'd read a poorly written play. The same lines, the same excuses, the same entitlement. None of them asked if Grace was okay. None of them asked what had happened to the child they had humiliated. Then the calls to my workplace started. Is Mrs. Cole available? A cousin asked to speak. My mother's friend left a message about family unity. A neighbor dropped a passive-aggressive text. I let it buzz in the background and kept working on the file. Evidence doesn't care about noise. It only cares about facts. A few days later, CPS workers arrived at my parents' home and at Carla's house. I didn't stand there and gloat. No, that's a storytelling device other people use. Instead, I sat with Grace, made pancakes, helped her paint new ornaments for our tree, and answered her questions honestly, that sometimes adults are wrong, that grown-ups have to be called to account, and that her voice would matter now in a way it hadn't before. Word traveled fast. Within 48 hours, the neighborhood knew the gist. A social worker knocked on my sister's door and explained the process. The look on their faces was small, not frightened in a moral way, but startled at the practical consequences. You could see the math flash in their eyes: lawyer fees, parenting classes, possible restrictions. It's funny how accountability suddenly becomes visibility, and no one wants to be seen making monsters of children. They started begging. Emails, texts, calls full of theatrical sorrow. We didn't mean to hurt her. We were only teaching her a lesson. You're blowing this out of proportion. My mother phoned once and sobbed on speaker. My sister left a voicemail begging for mediation. I listened, recorded dates and times. Their pleas were data points in my file. The police completed their initial report. CPS placed both households on a watch list. A social worker told me quietly that this was the first step. Sometimes it ends in supervised parenting classes. Sometimes it escalates. Either way, a family that had thought itself untouchable now had public records and caseworkers in their rearview mirror. And then the financial quiet hit them. The automatic transfers I'd been making stopped clearing. The payment for Evan's camp was reversed. The mechanic called to say the payment hadn't come through. In place of gratitude, there was outrage. How could you cut us off? My mother demanded. We did what any parent would do. I answered once. Being a parent doesn't include humiliating a child. Then I turned the phone off and made Grace hot chocolate. At night, when she fell asleep with paint on her fingers and a crooked paper star under her pillow, I sat at my desk and updated my timeline. Names, dates, audio files, medical notes, an organized archive that, if needed, would tell the story better than whispered family defenses ever could. I wasn't out for petty revenge. I was building a shield. When the first official letter arrived, a notice that CPS had opened a formal inquiry, my sister texted, "You've ruined us." I typed back, "I saved my daughter." Nothing about it felt satisfying in the way strangers online imagine revenge to be. There was exhaustion, relief, and a cold clarity. I had been a person who forgave and covered for decades, and that pattern had led me to a child with a Sharpie on her forehead. From now on, forgiveness without change wouldn't be an option. Grace slept in the next room with her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. I listened to her even breaths and thought about all the small, quiet things that would be different now. No more automatic bank transfers. No more letting their opinions shape how my child felt about herself. No more pretending that family loyalty trumped a child's dignity. We had crossed a line, and I had decided to make the consequence clear, legal, and irreversible if necessary. The next week was quiet, eerily quiet. No more calls, no more texts, just a pause in which the air itself felt suspicious, like the calm between lightning and thunder. Grace started sleeping through the night again, though she'd occasionally wake up crying and ask, "Mom, will they come here?" I told her no, that they couldn't, that there were rules now. I wasn't lying. CPS had confirmed both households were being monitored. Still, I left the porch light on every night and the phone by my bed. Then came the storm. It started with a phone call from a friend who worked at the district office. "Hannah," she whispered, "I just wanted to warn you. Your mom's been calling the school board, saying you're unstable. She's claiming you made false reports to get revenge." I laughed, because of course she had. When accountability fails, projection begins. My family had spent their entire lives narrating my flaws so they could hide their own. The difference now was that I wasn't playing along. Within 24 hours, the whispers began. People love a scandal more than a truth. A few parents stopped making eye contact at drop-off. Someone from the PTA sent me a concerned email about whether my personal matters might be affecting my work. The old me, the people-pleasing one who apologized before breathing, would have written long justifications. The new me hit delete, because while they were busy trying to destroy my reputation, their own was unraveling. It started small, a post in the neighborhood group about CPS visits on their street, then another about a family being investigated for child cruelty. By day 3, it had spread, like wildfire fueled by gossip and karma. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't stop it either. My sister called, voice trembling and sharp. "You've destroyed us. Do you understand? CPS made us take classes. Evan's school counselor called me in. They think we're abusers." "I didn't destroy anything," I said calmly. "You did that when you called a 7-year-old a liar and branded her face." Carla's voice cracked. "You went too far." "No," I said quietly. "I went far enough." Then came the next blow, police follow-ups. My parents, my siblings, all questioned about the night of Christmas Eve. When you write on a child's body, it's not discipline. It's evidence. I didn't know the details of their interrogations, but I knew the aftermath. My mother left a voicemail that sounded like a sermon on betrayal. My father's text simply said, "You'll regret this." The irony made me laugh out loud. They still thought this was about money or pride. They still hadn't realized it was about grace, about stopping the generational cruelty before it calcified in her bones the way it had in mine. At work, I buried myself in something I could control, students. My office became a refuge again. Kids sat across from me, talking about college, heartbreak, anxiety. I listened, encouraged, took notes, and went home to a little girl painting at our kitchen table, humming under her breath like she was rebuilding her joy piece by piece. It took me weeks to realize how tense I'd been living, waiting for some kind of retaliation that never came. Until one afternoon, as I was grading essays, Grace ran in from the porch out of breath. "Mom," she said, "Grandma's here." For a second, everything in me froze. I walked to the window. There she was, my mother, standing at the edge of the driveway, holding a tin of cookies like some nostalgic peace offering. I opened the door but didn't step out. "You shouldn't be here," I said. She smiled, all brittle politeness. "We just wanted to talk." "We?" My dad appeared behind her, hands in pockets. "It's time to move on, Hannah. Families shouldn't stay divided." "Divided?" I said softly. "You wrote on my child's face." My mother's voice tightened. "We disciplined her. You exaggerated this whole thing. And now we have people whispering about us at church. It's humiliating." "That's what you're worried about?" I asked. "Not what you did. What people think of you." She hesitated. "You can't keep Grace from us forever. She's family." I shook my head. "Family doesn't do what you did. Strangers have been kinder to her than you ever were." Her eyes hardened. "You're making a mistake, Hannah. She'll grow up and hate you for cutting us off." Grace had stepped quietly onto the porch by then, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She looked at my mother and said, "You hurt me. You don't get to come back." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. They turned and walked away, tin of cookies still clutched like a weapon that had failed. When they were gone, Grace climbed into my lap on the porch swing. "Did I do good?" she asked. I kissed the top of her head. "You did perfect." That night, I sat at my desk again, not to update evidence this time, but to write something else, a statement for the school newsletter. It wasn't about what had happened directly. It was about kindness, empathy, and believing children when they speak. It went viral in our district. Teachers emailed. Parents thanked me. One mother wrote, "You said what so many of us are afraid to say, that love without respect isn't love at all." The next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No name, just handwriting I recognized. Inside was a check for $2,000 and a note that said, "For what we owe you." I tore it up. Money doesn't heal bruises you can't see. Then the real fallout began. My sister's husband lost clients after the CPS file became public. My brother's wife's daycare license came under review. My parents' church revoked their volunteer positions, pending resolution. Each one of them called me in turn, cycling through denial, rage, and guilt. "You're ruining our name," my father said. I almost laughed. "You already did. I just stopped hiding it." There's a moment in every revenge story where you expect satisfaction, a surge of victory. It never came. What came instead was quiet, relief, and then something purer, peace. Grace was back to her old self. She started drawing again, filling sketchbooks with crooked trees, animals, and sunshine. Sometimes, she'd draw herself and me, holding hands under a huge sky. The trees always stood upright. The lights were never broken. One evening, she looked up from her sketch and said, "Mom, can we have our own Christmas next year? Just us." I smiled. "Yeah, baby. Just us." That night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "I don't want to be family disgrace anymore." I brushed her hair back. "You never were. You're the only reason we're free." The next morning, my email pinged. A message from the caseworker. Follow-up completed. Investigation confirmed child abuse. All parties notified of mandatory counseling and record placement. I sat there, staring at those lines, then at Grace's latest drawing taped to the fridge. The word liar had once been on her skin. Now, the only word on our wall was home. Sometimes justice doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like paperwork. It sounds like silence. And it feels like peace after years of noise. But I knew this story wasn't done. Because people like my family don't fade quietly. They regroup. They plot. And I was ready for whatever came next. Because now they finally understood something they never believed before. I wasn't the weak one. I was the warning. 2 weeks passed before the final ripple hit. It came on a gray Saturday morning, the kind of winter day where even the sunlight looks tired. Grace was sprawled on the couch in her pajamas, sketching snowflakes on printer paper. The house smelled like pancakes. Life felt normal again. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I peeked through the window, my breath caught. It was my sister, Carla, standing on the porch with her son, Evan, and a bag of groceries like this was going to be a casual visit. Grace froze when she saw them through the glass. Her small hands tightened around her pencil until it snapped. "Stay here," I told her. When I opened the door, Carla gave me this bright, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hannah," she said too sweetly, "can we come in? I just thought it was time to clear the air." Behind her, Evan looked smaller than I remembered, pale, quiet, holding a small wrapped box like it was a ticket out of trouble. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. "Whatever you have to say," I said evenly, "say it here." Carla sighed, performing exasperation like an Olympic sport. "Look, I know things went too far. Everyone's been punished enough. CPS made us take classes. We lost money. We're humiliated. But the holidays are over. Let's just be family again." I studied her face, not remorse, just inconvenience. "You didn't come to apologize," I said. "You came to reset the scoreboard." She frowned. "You think I don't feel bad?" "I do. We were all under stress. It was a misunderstanding. Evan feels terrible." I glanced at her son. "Do you, Evan?" He shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. Then he whispered, "I didn't mean to push her." It wasn't loud, but it was enough. From inside, Grace's voice broke through the door. "You did push me." Carla went stiff. "See what you've done," she hissed. "She's been poisoned against us." I stepped closer, low and steady. "No, she's finally not afraid of you." For a second, the air between us felt electric. Carla's eyes flashed, that same old mix of superiority and rage. "You've ruined this family, Hannah. You've turned everyone against us." "No," I said softly. "You did. You just didn't expect consequences." Her face reddened. "Mom and Dad said you'd do this. You always think you're better than us." I almost laughed. "No. I just decided being decent mattered more than being liked." She exhaled sharply and shoved the grocery bag toward me. "Fine. Here. Grace's favorite cookies. Maybe one day you'll remember what family means." I didn't take them. "I already do. That's why you're not coming back." I turned, opened the door just enough to step inside, and closed it before she could answer. Through the window, I saw her mouth moving, angry words I didn't care to hear, before she finally grabbed Evan's arm and stomped away down the path. Inside, Grace was crying quietly. I knelt beside her. She said it was just a mistake, Grace whispered. Was it? I took her face in my hands. No, sweetheart. A mistake is spilling juice. What they did was a choice. And we don't let people hurt us twice. She nodded, eyes glossy, and leaned into my chest. After that day, they stopped coming altogether. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was clean. By spring, CPS sent the final report. The case was officially closed, with all findings confirmed. Each adult received citations and mandatory follow-up counseling. Their records would remain visible for years. I didn't smile when I read it. I just felt something leave my body, a tension I'd carried since the night I found Grace in that corner. I poured a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched her paint by the window. Light poured in, soft and golden, and I thought about all the versions of love I'd mistaken for loyalty. You grow up thinking family is forever, that you're supposed to forgive endlessly, to make excuses for cruelty because it wears familiar faces. But love without safety isn't family. It's captivity, and I decided to break that chain for both of us. One afternoon, Grace came home from art class grinning, her backpack swinging at her side. Guess what? She said, bursting with pride. My teacher's putting my painting in the student gallery. I knelt to her height, brushed her hair back, and smiled. Of course she is. You worked hard for that. Her eyes sparkled. Can you come see it? Wouldn't miss it for the world. The night of the gallery, I stood with her under bright lights, surrounded by her paintings, color, movement, joy. The same child who once stood in a corner labeled Disgrace was now being applauded by strangers who saw nothing but talent and heart. A reporter from the local paper interviewed the students and asked Grace about her art. She said, I like painting things that didn't used to be beautiful but are now. I don't think anyone else caught the meaning, but I did. Afterwards, we walked home in the cold, holding hands. The stars above Savannah felt sharp and close, like they were watching. At home, I tucked her in. Mom, she murmured. Yeah. Do you think Grandma still hates me? I paused. I think Grandma doesn't know what love really is. She yawned. Then she's missing out. I smiled through a lump in my throat. Yeah, baby. She really is. Later, as I stood in the quiet kitchen, I looked at the folder on my desk, the one with evidence, reports, and photos. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Then I closed it carefully and put it in the drawer instead. Not out of vengeance, out of memory. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means protecting peace. The world outside had moved on, neighbors whispering, gossip fading, but the lesson stayed sharp. There's no such thing as too much love when you're defending a child who's been hurt. If people call that obsession, fine. I'll wear it like armor. Grace's laughter drifted from her room, soft and sleepy. I thought about how far we'd come, from humiliation to healing, from silence to art. And for the first time in years, I felt something deep and simple. Safe. So what do you think? Would you have done what I did, or handled it differently? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.